logistics challenges and best practices of the Nike Corporation. I mean, this company needs little to no introduction, but I'm just going to go ahead and give a brief bio. Their trademark swoosh is probably one of the most well-known emblems or logos in the world in comparison to, say, Mercedes or Apple. It's instantly recognizable everywhere. So the company actually got started in 1964 as Blue Ribbon Sports by Oregon Ducks track star Phil Knight and his coach Bill Bowerman. Japanese running shoes called the Tiger brand out of the trunk of their cars at track meets. Later, 7 years later, in 1971, Blue Ribbon Sports became Nike, led by Phil Knight, who later on would become the CEO and lead its way to its present-day success. So now, flash forward nearly 5 decades later, Nike operates in over 120 countries with over 44,000 employees. It's a product line now that started from just running shoes into apparel, gym clothes, collegiate and professional sports teams, jerseys, helmets, athletic equipment, etc., and progressive revenues worth over $32 billion annually. Campaigns, print ads, and sleek commercials are extremely well known, often using celebrities and sports stars. But what's not well known and what most consumers never really see is their complex and versatile logistics operating systems. So today's Nike's logistics supply chain is just vastly different than just selling Phil Knight and his coach selling shoes from the trunk of their cars. It involves a complex web of internationally sourcing raw materials from all over the world, coordination with their suppliers, overseas production facilities, and eventually distributing the product. So Nike, in that sense, Nike faces a lot of challenges with this elaborate supply chain. And from that, I'm going to pass the torch to my teammate, Eric, who will discuss their manufacturing processes.
So as far as Nike is concerned, they have actually outsourced all their manufacturing. And as a result of that, their transportation is also outsourced, essentially up until it gets to the U.S. coast or the United States, at which point they consolidate it in a distribution center or DC. They ship from the factory to the origin receiving docks of Nike distribution centers or their customers in particular. They use various methods of transportation, such as trucks, trains, planes, ships, whatever is necessary and whatever is most expedient, but also cost effective. They design a system where in every region there's a program with their origin consolidators, such as their freight forwarders or their global couriers, to ship all their products to 143 global destinations. The global consolidators, such as APL Logistics or Maersk Logistics, they're responsible for actually physically handling the cargo from the factory, receiving the freight, loading the containers, and such as communicating to specific destinations in their planning of deliveries. They also will collect the documents as far as on behalf of Nike. The exception to this rule is within the U.S. region, where a large amount of product is actually delivered to the customers instead of the Nike facilities. After the final product is delivered to the DC and to the retail stores, the other modes of transportation start to come into play to distribute it to further regions. On that note, we will take you to the various challenges that Nike faces.
Thanks, Eric. So just as any other supply chain, even though Nike does not have its own manufacturing factories, they do have challenges around how the product gets from their OEMs, their stores, and other strategic partners. Nike specifically talks about the big 5 outside of normal industry challenges. The first one is a commercial freight rates. So when the freight rates fluctuates, it can affect the transportation cost, drives it up for the product, which is eventually passed on to the consumer, and makes it hard to have competitive pricing. The capacity challenges are another issue, since manufacturing plants are in regions that have maybe, let's say, for example, different holidays, Ramadan, the Chinese New Year's. So really knowing that there's less capacity during those times will affect how much product is shipped, and it can turn out to be a huge nightmare if it's not planned correctly. The next one is the transportation security. So everybody, of course, have heard of, Captain Jack and more recently Captain Phillips. So those days are actually happening right now on the high seas. Piracy still exists, and it's a huge challenge to secure ships and also provide security for all other modes of transportation, whether it be rail or by truck or just, any normal carrier. Sustainable transportation is huge for Nike again. It's probably where they have their biggest footprint. Nike's energy and carbon dioxide emissions assessed footprints increased 17% and 11% from 2014 to 2015, primarily due to just significant increases in emissions from inbound logistics. So Nike does need to find new ways to have more sustainable transportation options that will help them conquer this. The last one there is the on-time delivery challenge. There are delays in shipments and delivery due to problems at, any site in the host country, whether it be maybe a labor strike or material delay. Just one tiny problem can have a domino effect across the supply chain. So this wraps up the big five challenges. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So there's no such thing as no risk. Every business is going to have risks, but there are ways to minimize industry risk. Nike really puts a deep focus on renewing their contract regularly, which ensures that they always have the right fit at the right time. This sets Nike apart from the rest of the competition and gives them a real competitive edge. Apart from routine risk plans, Nike talks specifically about managing their inbound and outbound risk at specific country levels, since every country will have a different type of risk. For example, in Vietnam, you might have an infrastructure risk, which will hamper the delivery on time. But Indonesia, it might have a higher risk of, let's say, lack of emergency preparedness in the event of a natural disaster, or maybe having plans around a Chinese New Year's versus a Ramadan in the Middle East, where those two regions are pretty much shut down during those times. So you have to be really careful with your capacity. You also have to be able to recognize and react to different levels of risks in different countries, since Nike does operate on a global level. The next one is constant communication. Another great way to minimize any risk is around communication. So Nike usually has pretty consistent meetings and conversations to help minimize their exposure. It's always best to over-communicate than under-communicate. And the final point here is really having backup plans. Nike has said they never put all of their eggs in one basket, and they always invest in backup plans. Thank you. I'll now hand you over to Tuan.
Great, thank you, Rohini. So while Nike actually measures performance and considers certain KPIs like the per unit cost, on-time delivery, shipments in full, etc., due to the competitive nature of KPI performance information, we're going to focus a little bit more on how Nike manages LSP performance and KPI development. Nike's relationships with LSPs are more of a partnership rather than just purely a customer and vendor relationship, and views this as a competitive advantage. The relationship requires that Nike engages with LSPs in development of KPIs and other performance metrics to ensure that the metrics are right-sized for the inbound and outbound and geographical considerations. For example, the metrics developed for LSPs in North America or in Europe are likely to look different just because of the geographical considerations that you have in Europe across different countries, and also something like the infrastructure that's available. Another data point for Nike is looking at public information and what those metrics should be. So industry best practices and obviously players like Amazon, Walmart, trying to understand what are some of the performance metrics that they have in place and what they're seeing with their LSPs goes a long way to inform what Nike does. So for example, just recently with the tendering process for freight rates, Nike leveraged the freight rates established by Walmart to inform their negotiations with their suppliers. And while not as large as a company like Walmart, Nike does deliver over 1 billion products a year to its consumers. So having that information plus the volume that Nike's pushing through suppliers creates Nike a lot of leverage in negotiations for these rates and other performance metrics. In determining how Nike manages their KPIs with their LSPs, Nike has ongoing performance reviews and also leader-to-leader meetings to ensure synchronization of KPIs. This information is not only used to manage the vendor, but it's also important when it comes to the LSP selection process. So, like I had mentioned earlier, Nike just went through its tendering process for freight rates for the rest of the year. And what it did was, while not only considering the external factors, it actually leveraged the performance metric that it developed as a selection criteria. At the end of the day, LSPs are an important component of Nike's overall strategies to deliver products to the final consumer. Identifying the right KPIs and performance metrics allows Nike to effectively manage its ability to execute. Because if you don't measure it, you can't improve it. And this is going to be critical as Nike looks to deliver its $50 billion revenue target by 2020. So that pretty much wraps up, Nike's KPI performance management framework. I'm going to turn it over now to Cyrus to talk about corporate and social responsibility.
Thank you, Tuan. So I'm going to cover corporate social responsibility and sustainability. So Nike becomes the first in their industry to publish their contract factories list in 2005. And some background for this is that throughout the 90s, Nike had gained reputation for employing child labor, which peaked in 96 when Life magazine showed the image of a child stitching a football in one of its overseas factories. While some argued the photo was staged, it became the center of debate about Nike's labor practices. Nike's rationale for deciding to disclose its contract factory base is that the potential benefits to the industry and factory workers would significantly outweigh possible competitive risks of revealing the contract factories that produce the company's branded products. Now, once they publish this list, actual change in the industry actually starts to take place because the company was actually addressing the significant challenges they face. And the first step to overcoming challenges is to actually admitting it. The intentional moves towards these, towards fixing up their factories proved successful. In 2013, auditors found violations in only 16% of the factories, which was down from 29% the previous year. Incidences of excessive overtime were down to 55, which was down from 116 the previous year, and only 93% of factories reported no incidences, which was up from 87% the previous year. And because it was Nike that took the charge and trying to get transparency to their industry, it was companies like New Balance, Adidas, Columbia, and Puma which followed soon after. Nike has an enhanced vetting process for its logistics service providers. To ensure continued compliance with their LSPs, they engaged them in an annual tendering process, as well as a survey about their sustainability practices. In the case of products moved by ocean, they can only participate in the tendering process if they are members of the GSR Clean Cargo Working Group. Now, the overall goal of these practices is to push continuous change in the setting of small achievements that the LSPs are expected to earn. It's in the best interest of the LSPs to meet these achievements, because if they don't, it'll land them on the improvement plan, which could jeopardize future business with Nike. Now, the BSR Clean Cargo Working Group is a leading global carrier shipper initiative dedicated to environmental performance improvement and marine container transport measurement, evaluation, and reporting. It's a business leadership initiative involving major brands, cargo carriers, and freight forwarders dedicated to reducing the environmental impacts of global goods transportation and promoting responsible shipping. Today, the Clean Cargo Working Group tools represent the industry standard for measuring and reporting ocean carriers' environmental performance and carbon dioxide emissions, and they represent about 85% of the ocean container shipping volume around the world. So we see the value that an organization like this brings to the environment. Now, the goals that Nike has for their sustainability are very ambitious, but it shows how serious they are about fixing the environment. In 2011, they earned the Top Series ACAA award for their sustainability reporting, which is an award given out by the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants. And some past recipients have been companies like GE and Ford Motor Company. Now, and by 2020, Nike's aiming to have targeting a reduction in the average environmental footprint of its shoes of 10%, as well as aiming to have a zero waste from contracted footwear manufactured sent to landfill or incineration without energy recovery. By 2025, the company plans to use 100% renewable energy in its owned and operated facilities. And since 2012, some technology that Nike has invented, such as Flyknit technology, it's reduced waste by nearly 3.5 million pounds. And since 2010, more than 3 billion plastic bottles have been converted from landfills and converted into recycled polyester for Nike performance products. And Nike's color dry technology, which uses which dyes fabric using zero water, to save more than 20 million liters of water. And they have a reuse a shoe program, which has recycled approximately 30 million pairs of shoes and turns them into whole running tracks around the country, especially for high schools. So we see the changes that Nike has made has pushed Nike from a supervillain to a bit of a superhero in sustainability and the corporate social responsibility arena. And I'll hand it over to Trey for the conclusion.
All right, thanks, Cyrus, and thanks, team. So in conclusion, Nike has been, the company in itself has been on an incredible odyssey, much like its products and conglomerate global supply chain. The company has taken critical and honorable advances in reducing its carbon footprint and overall sustainability practices, what Cyrus just discussed. So they seek out long-term relationships with the LSPs. They conduct organized business reviews, leadership development, and an open communication policy with employees to minimize their supply chain disruption risk. So former CEO Phil Knight and his keen vision and leadership really led the way to its present day success. And as Twan discussed, our Nike SME, Stacy Kobayashi, the logistics executive, discussed and let us kind of chimed us in on insightful practices involving risk minimization. So Nike's revenues are consistently growing every year, but in this hyper-competitive environment, mainly with Puma, the corporation needs to keep evolving with their logistics practices and strategies that are financially sound, environmentally sustainable, and technically viable for all stakeholders, including employees, suppliers, manufacturers, logistics, distributors, and finally, its end user, the consumers. So from that, we'd like to thank you for your time, and we hope you enjoyed the presentation. Thank you.